So today we're going to be talking about leadership, and we'll start with soloist conductor. So,
And just for the record, Leadership is a book by John C. Maxwell. It's got a lot of good ideas on how to be a better leader and how to be a better person as well.
mhm. Yeah, so I'd probably say this is a more advanced book than most of his books. Like this is kind of taking already pretty good leaders and taking them to the next level. But I think it's can also be very valuable for people just to start out with too.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of recognizing where do you actually want to end up and what kind of leader do you actually want to be. And so the first leadership is from soloist to conductor. And so in this one, he kind of talks about an example of a lady who's very good. You mean like a musician or something like that? I don't know if she played, but a violinist or something like that. And she really mastered her own craft and became a great violinist in her own respect. But then she kind of looked to make the next transition of how do I be a great conductor? Because one thing to just be like a soloist, perform on your own, but it takes a whole different level of skills to be able to organize maybe an orchestra or symphony or whatever it is. It could be 20, 50, 100 different people playing different instruments.
And just to, not to cut you off, but
Mhm.
just to clarify, so soloist meaning just one individual.
Mhm.
Let's say you play guitar, to conductor, let's say you have a band, or if you're a actual in front of an orchestra which has maybe like 30 to 50 musicians and instruments in there, right? So go shifting from just leading yourself into leading others.
Mhm. And you can see it with so many bands. It's like how hard even like most modern bands are kind of like 3 to 5 people, and most of them can only stay together for 5, 10 years or something like that, and eventually,
Especially nowadays.
yeah, the personality differences just kind of you mean break up the band. So it's very tough. You mean like when it's just focused on you, you can kind of control everything. It's like okay, I can control how much practice time I'm gonna do. I can control the instrument. I can control the environment, and it's a lot easier to kind of like craft the whip on yourself and you may make sure you get things done. But when you start bringing other people into it, it becomes a lot tougher. Like, how do you get everybody to practice at the same time, and how do you figure out what you're going to practice? And I think there is some benefits to being a conductor versus being a band member because there's a natural hierarchy with, you mean, kind of that. It's like the conductor is the head person, whereas in a band, it's not necessarily as obvious. There's kind of this natural inclination that we're all equal. But generally, you do need a leader who's going to take charge and kind of make things happen, and not necessarily just in an authoritarian manner. But there kind of needs to be some kind of hierarchy. Or, you mean we tend to struggle with that?
Well, a vision to pursue,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like an end goal. So even if it's a band, the idea that like, okay, we want to be producing an album. So
Mm-hmm.
that's one benchmark, and then maybe it's getting our music out there in public as well, or performing in person. But you kind of need someone to, or a group of people to start having a vision and moving towards it.
Mm-hmm. And it's also tricky because you need people who can deal with interpersonal conflict. That one person might be heading like this musical direction, the other person might be heading this direction, and there kind of needs to be either a leader in one of the two people that can kind of seek first to understand, then to be understood, or there kind of needs to be a third party person who's kind of able to step outside of it and see it. So, kind of like Dr. Dre was a very good example of a producer who was able to kind of be outside of the performer, but be able to take that performer to a much higher level because of that. And
Mm-hmm.
he's been able to bring a lot of great artists. Um,
Let's say Rick Rubin's probably another good example
yeah, exactly.
as well.
Yeah. I can't remember who. I think he worked with the Red Hot Chili Peppers. I'm not sure.
Rick Rubin?
Yeah.
I feel like he's worked with everyone.
Everybody, yeah. Yeah, so it's
and a very like famous behind the scenes figure as well,
Mhm.
which is interesting, which probably helps his success. I would imagine many of the artists that work with this person know that he's not really doing it for himself, but he's truly pursuing the vision of whatever it is musically.
Mhm. So one of the things that I think it's valuable to think about is that so a lot of people aren't even at the stage where they want to be that soloist. They don't want to kind of hone their craft. And we're not just talking about music here, but it could be about being a great teacher. It could be, I mean, even doing a great job working at McDonald's. Not a lot of people necessarily want to go on that path of mastery. So that's kind of the first step is that you kind of want to first accept that and appreciate that, like, hey, I want to do a good job and and I want to be the best version of myself I can be. But then, to me, the next step that's very logical from that, because imagine you're just a great teacher for the next 30 years or something like that. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that. But like I've seen great teachers who, if they had developed more skills, learned kind of leadership, all these kind of things, they could have not only been a great teacher in their classroom and have students necessarily wanting to come into their classroom, they could have been a great department head and had a great math department, and maybe their students that are actually coming to that school just for the math. Oh, it doesn't generally happen just for a subject. It usually happens for a sport, like if it's a really good hockey program or something like that.
But even knowing that there are particular teachers that are more favorable, like obviously keeping my professional hat on in mind, but recognizing that you're gonna have situations where students know ahead of time, like, oh, this teacher, that teacher, and that teacher, like those are the people you want for your subjects. Now, if you just have a very solid math department, it's like, hey, everyone who goes to the school does good in math because the teachers are all they've just grown a lot as people, and then that result plays out in the classroom.
Yeah, and one of John Maxwell's sayings for that is that you either have to train them, like you have to develop them as people, or you have to trade them. It's like I have to, let go of this person or something like that. And so I've been watching basketball, and this year the Golden State Warriors won. And Andrew Wiggins, I don't know if you know who he is, but he was kind of
apparently. Does he still play for the Timberwolves?
Well, he did, but he was traded to to Golden State. I'm not sure if it was this year or last year, but he was the number one pick, I think, back in 2014, 2016. Yeah. And everybody said he was just like the biggest bust. Like, he just wasn't the player that he was expected to be. And so he got traded to Golden State, and I was watching Golden State from probably about halfway through the year. And I'm wondering, like, who the heck is this guy? Like, why are they paying him $28 million? He's not doing anything. Like, he's a decent player. Like, but it's like, they've got other players like Jordan Poole, who they're paying like $2 million a year, and they're basically doing the exact same contribution on the field. And I was just like, who is this guy? But then playoffs come, and he just dominated. Like, they came up against like the Dallas Mavericks and Luka Doncic, and like that guy's insane. Like, he can just do crazy stuff. And Andrew Wiggins guarded the shit out of him. It was just like, it was really impressive. I was like, whoa, like where did this kid come from? And then in the finals too, he did really good against Jason Tatum, and like his defense just like opened up, and he actually did rebounding. Like, that's one of the things that drives me crazy about the Golden State Warriors is they don't rebound. Like, they take their 3-point shot, and either it goes in and Stephen Curry's already in the backcourt, or it doesn't and they don't get it. And it's just like, what are you guys doing? Like, if you just actually went to the net and tried to get the ball, and then you just throw it back out for another 3-pointer and make another shot, that would have been so much better. And so one of the things I saw with Andrew Wiggins is that he again started rebounding, and he got points for himself. He got assists for it. And so one of the things that I think is very interesting is that, so one, it's to be very valuable is to be that conductor, but two, it's actually very valuable to be on a well-conducted team. So like Andrew Wiggins, when he was on the Timberwolves, it just didn't go anywhere. It's like, it was just awful.
Why.
And a big part of it is just the team and the environment. He's not the star player. He's, I'm not sure how you call him a role player, but he's like a second or third player. So he's not the Stephen Curry. He's not like that person that's going to carry the team on his back. But he's kind of that person that's like, whatever the team needs, as long as there's some other people that are taking the leadership, show me what to do, then I can come into my own in that respect.
He's a very reliable person then when he's given the opportunity to excel where he excels.
Yeah. And so that's...
because he probably doesn't shoot a lot of threes.
He actually can, but it's not his forte. It's like, he's not Stephen Curry.
Seems like rebounding and being under the net.
That's when he really shines. And he is a decent 3-point shooter, but I'd almost say everybody on the Warriors is, because there's so much coverage on Steph Curry and Klay Thompson, is that these guys are just getting open threes. Like, you just pass them the ball and nobody's covering them. And it's like, a lot of these NBA players, if nobody's covering you, you can make a three. It's only if you have like the best defender on you, and then Stephen Curry is taking that. He's taking that pressure. Like they had, I think, Marcus Smart on the Celtics, and he was always covering Stephen Curry. And they'd be like, you mean like this close? Like Stephen Curry would be basically on like middle line, like the center line, no ball around him, and Marcus Smart's like right on his ass, and it's just like, okay, let it go. You mean, but like it just opened up the field for so much everybody else.
But that's almost necessary, right? When you know that guy can just put up 15 points in 5 minutes,
100%,
and that can leave you in the dust. Like you need a guy again to have whatever traits he has. You know, kind of fluctuating between soloist and conductor. Like, okay, I have to do my job. My job is covering Steph Curry, right?
And that's one of the things that, like, so I was listening to the interview with Joe Lobs or something like that. I can't remember. He's like the president or owner of the Golden State Warriors, or the main one. And I was listening to this guy, and he's just a genius. Like, he's like a business genius, and like really understands not how to just get a few players, but how to build a great organization. Like, he's done it with his own. He had like some kind of technology company that he built up and got very rich from that, and used that money to buy the Golden State Warriors. But he was able to take Steph Curry, who I think was already there, and I think Klay Thompson was there when they bought the organization.
Yeah. And they were relatively unknown before they really took off.
Yeah,
right?
You mean it's like they're you mean they had some signs of greatness and stuff like that, but everybody kind of criticized Steph for his ankles and stuff like that. But it's kind of like that transition of like bringing in Steve Kerr as the coach and like really kind of bring the system. And to me, that's kind of work of a great conductor. Is I'd say that owner is a great conductor. Like, hey, let's bring other great people, and it's like even other conductors. You mean like I'd say Steve Kerr is a great conductor. You mean like great player. Like he's won so many championships. Was with Phil Jackson and the Chicago Bulls. But then it's like he's his own great kind of coach in that environment. And to me, what was very interesting in that kind of talk, he actually got fined for the talk I listened to, like $500,000 or something like that.
Oh my god!
Because he was saying like it's not fair, the luxury tax that they're putting on us. Is that I understand if I just want to go and buy all the best players, and I'm gonna get taxed for that because I have too much expense. Like I'm spending everybody else. But his criticism's like Andrew Wiggins is the only player that we've got from somebody else. All the other players we've grown ourselves, like Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, like all these people we drafted, we developed, and now we're just trying to pay them a fair wage so that they don't go to another team, and we're getting punished because of that. Like Jordan Poole.
Does Kevin Durant still play on the? No, he went to Brooklyn.
Okay. So he wasn't drafted. So he's another kind of example of somebody they bought in.
But their original roster of absolute murderers was homegrown, pretty much.
Yeah, I'd say like 90% of the talent that they have has been homegrown talent. And he's like, it's not fair that I'm getting penalized for doing a good job of growing up my own players, turning them into stars, and then having to pay them just to keep them around. It's like I shouldn't have to be growing stars and then letting them go to somewhere else because I can't pay them. It's like there should be some kind of workaround if they're your own talent. Just kind of take away from your salary cap. And it's like it's a fair statement. And a week later, the NBA fines him for that. And it's like, whoa, come on. You know what I mean? Because like you kind of see it with like the LA Lakers that they just buy like LeBron and they buy like all these like top end players. And same thing with the Brooklyn Nets. Is that instead of trying to develop their own talent, they're continually just buying up the best players and trying to build a team that way.
You know, I have my own suspicions, but just for the sake of bringing it back to the podcast, you know, like why do you think that is? Like, why are these teams focusing on buying? Like, because everyone knows you have LeBron on your team, like you could win a championship just with one guy, right?
Yep.
Maybe not anymore. I mean, he is old, but he's still very much a presence on the court.
Yep.
Or whether it's a guy like Kevin Durant, who's a very significant player. You know, he can put up numbers. James Harden as well. He got traded around, and people thought like, oh, he's going to be the pivotal character on the team. You know, why do you think people lean towards, let's say, like, okay, let me just buy these players, put them together. You know, not even look at how the puzzle piece fits, just jam it together and make a crude-looking image of what it should be.
Well, it's a lot easier that way. So, like, if you're developing talent, it's like one, you have to know what raw talent looks like. So you have to be looking at like who has potential. So like that kind of brings me back to Tom Brady and the Patriots, is that they kind of had Tom Brady on their sites, and it was like I think Bill Belichick was saying it's like 6th round or 7th round or whatever, and it's like, hey, that Brady guy hasn't been drafted. It's like, I mean, we kind of like him. We like the potential he's got. But it's like, what did they look for that other teams didn't see? Like basically the greatest quarterback of all time, didn't get drafted to like the 6th round.
I didn't know that. That's insane.
Yeah, and
That's actually insane.
And it's absurd. And like even when they brought him in, it wasn't that they're like, oh, we have a star quarterback. They already had a good quarterback. I think they had Drew Bledsoe, who was quite well known at that time and quite well respected. And I think it was like the 7th week or something like that. He gets injured in the game, and Tom Brady comes in, and then never gave the job back. It's just like he just like started throwing touchdowns, started winning and stuff like that. And I think they actually won like the Super Bowl that year. Okay, he started to come in halfway through the season, and I kind of felt bad for Drew Bledsoe because good player, all that kind of stuff, but just the wrong situation, wrong time. Like if it had been like any other kind of backup, he probably would have got his job back once he was healed.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, so it's very tough to actually see talent. Like, what can I see in you that all the other people that you've had as bosses and stuff like that didn't see? Or the same thing with Stephanie is that most people don't actually see what raw talent is. They're kind of like, if you think of what most employers are looking for, it's like they're looking for like university degree, 5 years of relevant experience, all this kind of stuff. They want somebody who's kind of perfect, like be all end all. Whereas to me, I'd much rather, in some situations, but I'd rather take somebody who's like an 18-year-old kid who I can see has potential, and then work with them kind of throughout life.
Well, it's interesting dichotomy of like, okay, so if you can get them young, let's say 18 to 22, and you recognize like, hey, this kid's hungry, they have a work ethic, they got a good head on their shoulders, like, yeah, you can take that person and run with them. But it seems like if you find people later in life, it's almost like you want to reverse engineer their successes. Like, has this person had success in their life prior? It seems like that was something you've done, right? And but in the hiring realm, it seems almost like, do we like this person? Do we get along? Rather than like, is this a successful employee? Did they get their job done? Right? And then recognizing, because I would say even in my own case, like, I've only been teaching for 2 years, and so there's so much that I have to learn. But hearing from my principal that like he really appreciated that, okay, this guy's hungry, like he's okay with me giving him more classes. He doesn't mind taking subjects out of his material. And, I don't know if I've ever complained about the material itself, maybe the students, and for various reasons, because, some things transcend my position in the hierarchy and need to be dealt with otherwise. But having those people on your team who are willing to put the learner hat back on, the beginner hat, and say, okay, like, just so you're aware, like, I'm not comfortable with this, but I'll give it a try. And hopefully you guys can support me if I'm not failing, but I'm willing to try. I'm willing to grow and see if I can do this thing and get it done and see it through to the end. That's a big one, right? Coming back to looking at either people's raw potential or their past successes.
Well, I think that's one of the things that, so going back to Tom Brady, is that growth mindset, I think, is very valuable in distinguishing which players will go on to success and which won't.
And almost like the soloist mindset, like, okay, like I'm a quarterback or I'm a teacher, I'm a husband, a mother, or whatever, and I need growing to do. I have to pick up that instrument and practice. Whatever your instrument is. It could be a real instrument, but it could also just be, your skills. So, as a father, it's like, okay, like I got to get in shape so I can play with my kids when I get home, because they're eager to see me, right?
Well, like a lot of players, when they're drafted into whatever league they get into, it kind of feels like they've made it. And to me, it's kind of like, no, it's like you've got a whole new challenge. It's like you were playing at this level here in college, and now you've got to come up with a whole new set of skills. Like you might have to completely change your game in order to compete at this higher level. It's like, as a quarterback, maybe you had 3.5 seconds to throw the ball. But now, as a quarterback in the NFL, you've got 3 seconds. And you might have to completely change your whole setup process for how you get that ball out to that receiver. Because that half a second is the difference between a sack and even a successfully completed pass.
Or the end of your career, right? If it's bad enough.
And so, like with Tom Brady, like one of the things that stuck out to me, like when I was watching all the documentaries on him, is he was addicted to watching film. Like he would even get tapes like of game footage and just watch and watch and watch and like understand the defense of like the teams he's competing against and understand the offense of other teams and see what he can pull and stuff like that.
So he really studied football.
Mm-hmm. And so it's like when he comes to the field, he makes his whole team better because of this work. It's like he's not just working on throwing and all this kind of basic stuff. It's like he knows he can see more than other quarterbacks can see, other people can see. Like he's basically got the same kind of game knowledge as like their video analyst or their head coach and stuff like that. And like he's talking with the head coach of like going back and forth with these kind of plays and ideas. And so he's not just a quarterback. It's like kind of he's like a video analyst and a coach and like all this kind of stuff in one. And I think that's one of the things that made him very special. I mean,
and then that even speaks to mastery in a sense of like it's people, again, as we mentioned, like people want to focus on the things that are easy, right? So let's say with men, it's very common. It's like for most men, like if their life's not going well, a lot of them will say, okay, I got to hit the gym, put on some muscle. And you do that 6 months, 12 months is very valuable. You should have a good habit of that.
Yep.
But then you see these absolute monsters in the gym, and it's like, okay, clearly you've worked on that aspect of your life. You are top 0.1% physical fitness, physique. And those guys, to solve their new problems, will just continue to go to the gym. It's like, hey, bro, that was the solution for your past problems. And now you have confidence. Now you have an understanding of nutrition, sleep, good habits, fitness, right? And you've created this temple of a body. And so similarly, like as a quarterback, you'd think like by the time you get to NFL, your biggest issue isn't throwing the ball. It's everything else, right? And so same with life. It's like, as a teacher, like I think in about 3 to 5 years, I'll have mastered my content quite well and could probably teach my courses off the top of my head.
Yep.
Then it transcends to how do I get material that's actually engaging? How do I create systems and setups to teach kids to write? And I'm already starting that very early in my career, which I'm grateful for. It's like, how do you solve these major problems, these big hinges, as we call them, that move big doors, that actually get kids feeling better about themselves, right? Like if I can take a student and take them for wherever they're at and bump them up a few levels in their writing, like that's awesome, right? And that really, it's a different level analysis of the craft of whatever instrument it is to say, okay, it's not the easy stuff that I need to work on, like knowing the material or throwing the football or running, jumping, whatever it is, right? It's kind of the problem solving. So let's say if you take that back to the example of a parent, understanding that, okay, so let's say you take that dad from our previous example, now he's spending 90 minutes in the gym every week and he feels better. Okay, then he moves on to like, oh wait, every time I eat pasta or lasagna, I just feel terrible. Then he starts to learn about his diet, right, and nutrition. And then once he's done the soloist work on himself, he can begin to conduct his family. So he starts recognizing behavior in his children. Like, my kids are so hyper after dinner. What's up? Oh, well, we just gave them a bunch of Coca-Cola and, sugar or whatnot, and now they're very hyper. Okay, how do we work on that, right? So it's like mastery in my understanding, and that conductor mastery is like seeing those problems before they occur, or recognizing that those problems are going to happen and trying to create systems around them. What are your thoughts on that?
I'd almost say being a conductor is almost anti-mastery in a sense. Like mastery, the way I kind of say most society views it is like being that violinist, getting better and better and better at that. But I'd almost say that you want to have that mastery, you want to understand mastery, because mastery has a role in life. But what you really actually need to do is after you become a good master, you actually want to transition to being a generalist, kind of like a jack of all trades. And so that's kind of what I'd say Tom Brady is. Like, I wouldn't say he's necessarily like the best video analyst in the world.
Of course not, right?
But he's good. He's like a good video analyst. Like he might not be able to get a job as a video analyst, but he's like a good one. You mean? And like a good coach. Like he's kind of at the level. And it's the combination of these different skills is kind of what makes it like. In that case, it's like that dad doesn't have to be like a I think they're
You just have
pediatricians.
to be a nutritionist,
Yeah, it
right?
doesn't have
But
to be perfect.
simply making those correlations of like, okay, I feed my kids 50 grams of sugar and they're bouncing off the walls 20 minutes later. What do we do?
So what
Right?
I kind of see is most people focus in on their mastery, and that's all they do, and they kind
Yeah.
of ignore like other parts of their life. Like your cousin, you mean when he's working, and like you mean he come here with raccoon eyes because he hasn't been eating right, he hasn't been sleeping right,
Yeah.
all this kind of stuff. He talks like, yeah, I just have like an egg salad sandwich each day, and that's it. And it's like, man, like this is, you mean we gotta kind of balance this out. Just working 13, 15 hours a day isn't gonna cut it, and like you want to have mastery, but you also want to kind of be a well-rounded person. And I think that's what you really need as a conductor is like to take a step back and see how does this system work? Like how do I get all these people kind of working together and like what are these kind of traits? Because it's very tricky. I mean, it's like how do you get like the teachers all together? Like you mean going for poetry club, having a good time, getting to know each other, and kind of moving up that the 5 levels of leadership, and it's very tricky. You know?
Well, and one thing I've been incredibly grateful for this year, and something that I would say has been a subconscious intention. So previously in my life, a conscious intention was to express gratitude verbally. And so guys I'd meet at the gym, I'd let them know like, hey, it was really nice seeing you again. I'm glad you're training. Like, ask about their lives. Like, hey, I'm glad things are going well for you. And just letting them know that I value their presence being there. Well, now I'm working on kind of the social grooming of going around to each teacher and checking in when I can, like, hey, how are your classes going? What students do you have? What are the problems? And just giving them an opportunity to talk. And it does kind of, well, I won't speak to that. I'm not sure how they perceive it, but at least the way I see it in my own mind is like, okay, I have a very good working relationship in my estimation to all of my colleagues. And that's not the case in every school, and that's not the case with everyone, right? And just recognizing that taking that little bit of time to invest in the people around you allows you to better conduct certain things, whether it's to my own ends. It's like, like I'm getting to know the foods teacher better. She came back after mat leave. It's like, I want to be able to get some free food here from students, but just seeing like, okay, like how does this teacher solve problems? How does this teacher solve problems? Do these problems exist universally? Like, who are the issues? Okay. And then recognizing that if other people aren't willing to change, knowing that I'm someone who loves learning and growing, it's like, okay, I have this student, I have this problem. Oh, everybody has the same problem with this student. Okay, what else could I do? What more responsibility could I take to help solve these problems, right? And so hopefully, we can get some flag football going at the school and like bring in some of those kids, especially some of those young boys who just haven't reined themselves in yet, and providing them an opportunity to create a good relationship with at least one teacher at the school, have a positive relationship with the school in general, and to also give them something to look forward to, right? And to expend energy on, right?
Yeah. 100%.
And then even there, you can create like what you decide to do with teams. So it's like, okay, 20 people show up. Like, let's have some grade 12s, 10s, 11s, and 9s on each team. Now, all of a sudden, this ninth grader who maybe feels a little uncomfortable, whatever, and now they know some kids in the school. And then, because I have more influence or have a lot of influence with a lot of students, I can tell those grade 11s and 12s, like, hey, now's the time to, like, coach this kid. Remind them, like, do this, do that, right? Because it's very concerning in my own mind for other reasons, which I won't discuss on camera, but a lot of students come to me and they're like, "Oh, Mr. Quadra, like, what do we do about these kids in the hallway?" I'm not going to specify. It's like, and reminding students like they're your peers. You need to check that behavior. If I do it, then it's truly bullying because I have the power in the situation. But if you do it, like you're just peers, right? You need to let them know and teach them how things go. Like they need to accept responsibility. Let's say as a grade 12 to conduct other behavior in school, right? To say like, okay, this is allowed, that's not allowed. And it takes a tremendous amount of courage, right? Because a lot of us look to the hierarchical leader, right? And sometimes, that person can be incredibly limited and restricted, especially the school system. It's like, teachers, principals, and whoever else supports staff. Like, we can't just freely make our decisions. There is a governing body above us, which limits what we can do. But what we can do is, be that soloist and master ourselves, or strive to master ourselves, to have more of an influence, to positively benefit that
Mhm.
school community, or just whatever it is. It could be you and your friend group, right? So like I have a lot of students that play D&D. It's like, well, someone needs to take leadership and say, okay, we're going to play at my house.
Yeah.
Okay, someone needs to take leadership. I'll be DM, right?
Mhm.
Or whether it's playing video games together, it's like actually asking, like, hey, like, what is your online username, right? Or dating and relationships, making an effort to be in that person's space and to interact with them, right? Taking that leadership, taking more responsibility on, so that you can in turn have more influence as well.
Like I remember my own experience. Like I had some friends that were playing Dungeons and Dragons, and they invited me, and I wasn't too sure about it. And then they basically bullied me in the game. It's like ideally you'd want to set somebody up of like to win, but then I basically just got stabbed by a goblin or something like 10 times, and the game was over. And I was just like, I'm not gonna play this game again. You mean it's like I was unsure to make
That's
it
funny.
win, but then it's like you didn't make it any fun. Like you mean it's like you want to set them up to win. Like I remember at the old house with some of the roommates, we were playing Mario Kart for a bit, and when I had like a competitor who was a real competitor, then I tried. Like I gave it my all, and like, we went all out, and I won. But then I had like another friend who was terrible. Like he barely knew how to go like the right direction, and so I let him win. And then the other guy who's really competitive, he couldn't understand it, and it's like you got to make it fun. Like you mean it's like you can't be like the giant defeating like all these little mice. You mean it's like if you have somebody that's at your level, compete. You mean go all out.
Yeah.
But it's like if you're up here and they're down there, it doesn't
Encourage, uplift.
Exactly. Like go down, try to lift them up, and encourage them.
And just on record, like my first girlfriend I got, because part of what we did was like she really liked chess.
Mm.
She didn't know how to play, but I did,
Yeah.
and I also liked chess, so I taught her how to play. Absolutely slapped her around like the first game,
Yeah.
maybe the second game as well. But one of the games that I gave to her pretty much. Like I intentionally played, like reduced my skill, made some mistakes, gave her some freebies, and she won the game. She felt great, and it's like cool. We maybe played chess another 2 times after, but I extended the amount of games played by 2 by losing this third one or the second one, whatever it was, right? And it's like, well, I mean, we can talk about that whole, like, do you want to be the person who wins games, or do you want to be the person who gets invited, right? That's a whole other episode and discussion, but, recognizing that even for myself, this week, I had a student who is very chatty, and I needed to move the student, and the first place my mind went to was like, burn it all to the ground, to hell with everything. We're gonna go right back to factory rows, and we're gonna put a seating plan in because of this one incident. And so I moved the kid, he moves, and whatever was happening next, as I'm kind of teaching and instructing, I'm also using some of my brain in the background, just thinking like, why am I thinking this way? Like, why do I want to burn everything down? Sure, I'm irritated, and that's absolutely valid. But then I told myself, like, hey, chill out. Like, just relax. Like, it's just, first week, first few incidents, right? And then better yet, I one-upped it by saying, okay, like, now go up to that kid, now that he's been sitting there quietly, and tell this student, like, hey, are you ready to make better choices? Yes? Okay, you can go back. Nice. Right? Letting him know that, and, this is, again, like something we saw in Lion King. It's like, Mufasa, the Simba's dad, the kind of the first king, he was very upset at Simba because Simba disobeyed one of his rules. And so he's very, not necessarily harsh, but he's very curt with his son, and very much like cold shoulder, like, you disobeyed me.
Yep.
And, Simba doesn't understand, and his dad explains to him, and Mufasa's able to see that, okay, Simba understands what he did wrong, and he understands his mistake in the situation. And then everything returns back to normal. You get this harmony again, right? And it's like, I guess symbolism happens, as Jonathan Pajot would say. It's like that scene took place in the classroom of life. And we'll see how it goes with this kid. And for the most part, he's been better with me since then. But instilling, trust. Okay, so let's go back to soloist and conductor. When you do get offered that situation or experience where you're a conductor, letting your conductees know that they can trust you, that, hey, you're allowed to make mistakes here, you're allowed to grow and fail and mess up. And also, hey, you're allowed to succeed. Like, I won't take it out on you and be bitter, like, oh, look at this. Like again, I told you the I won't say the words here, but the advice I gave to one of those students who, after applying that advice, he ended up getting a girlfriend.
Yeah, exactly.
And him and I will talk about that every now and then occasionally. I don't see him as much, but letting your conductees know that if you take my advice and you succeed, I will let you own your success. I won't say like, hey, remember I gave you that advice. So that thing you gained is actually because of me, not you. It's like because like I've had, you and I have told advice to countless number of people, and very few of them actually accept it, integrate it, and act on it. And recognizing that that is a very, very, very holy thing almost. That if someone does that, to not break their trust, and I don't know, whatever. I want to use a word that I can't on video, but to have that intimacy of like, okay, like you took my advice, you integrated it, you put it into the world, and it made your life better. I'm happy for you on that success, right? But that relationship, I guess, even going from soloist to conductee, and then when you're or conductor, and when you're a conductor, how you act with the people around you to encourage them to grow, to inspire them, and remind them that they can be more than what they are. It's very important.
And you just have to take on a higher level of kind of expectations of yourself and what. Because you have to be willing to give grace to people. Like mistakes are made. We don't necessarily know what we're doing in a lot of cases, and sometimes we just want to test boundaries and see what's going on and stuff like that. But as that kind of leader, or as that conductor, it's like you kind of have to take that higher level. Because if you just start alienating people, like if you alienate that student,
it would have been hell.
Yeah,
this student is in my block 1 every day, and in my block 4 every other day. You don't. Not like you're obviously going to have disagreements with people, and you're not going to get along with everyone. But you got to ask yourself, like, do we not get along because I'm an idiot and I did something stupid? Or do we not get along because we just see the world so differently? Now, being mature and adult, like if I see the world differently than other people, I have no trouble just not interacting. But if I've done something stupid, and I probably did plenty of stupid things this week as well. If the relationship has been soured on that, it's like that's on me.
Yeah.
Right. That's on you as an individual. If you've made that choice, whether it was conscious or unconscious or subconscious, like it's still on you, right?
But also, if we hold them to such a high standard that one mistake they make, we just like lay the book on them. They're going to hold us to the exact same standard. Like any kind of mistake, they're going to jump down your throat. But if you hold the standard like, hey, and this is a mistake, let's address this problem, and you do it in a very respectful manner, they're going to give you that same grace. Because as a conductor, you're going to make mistakes. Like there's just so much to do, so many mistakes that can potentially be made as a conductor. It's like you want to give that grace to the people that you're leading. So in turn, that you can get that grace back. Because without that grace, it's like none of us would ever be able to get it.
Right. And one of my classes, the older ones, it's like taking the time to acknowledge to them after I gave back their essay, like, hey, I made a mistake. But also then this year, reminding them, like, hey, listen, like, I still know that I made a mistake because I crucified myself about it, as often as I can. And letting them know. And so, this time around when we did our writing seminar, I just led with that same thing, like, hey, I made an error and I'm trying to make an adjustment. With that being said, just know that this is a first draft. I don't know how well it's going to go. I'm just experimenting. And, the class is quiet. They're like, yeah, we totally get it. That's kind of the vibe I got from the room. It's like, we get it. You're trying. And it's not easy. Like, it's one thing to write well. I'm learning that it's a whole new thing to teach people how to write well. It's been very difficult for me because I look back now. I was reflecting the other day. It's like, what do I actually remember about learning how to write? Like nothing. Like so, I ask myself, well, how do I know how to write? And I'm no top tier expert, but I'd say I'm quite well at writing. And it's like I don't know. I really don't know. And so to be the conductor of this skill, just recognizing, okay, like I had all these privileges. Like I just grew up in a time when there weren't cell phones. And so what did I do? I read. Like I read every day probably. I could read a book in one day.
Yep.
What did that do for me? It exposed me to writing, to different styles as well. And so again, having that grace in the classroom in that moment of like, hey, I'm trying to figure this out. And I understand that that's very precarious for you because your grade depends on me figuring it out.
Mm-hmm.
But just knowing that, hey, we're going to get through this together and we'll be better at the end of it. Right?
Well, a tricky part to think through too is that so you're a fact finder, and your natural mode of operandi as a fact finder is to write, and so you're almost genetically predisposed to enjoy writing and be a more competent writer than other people because your natural instinct is to look for the facts. Whereas like me being a quick start first, it's like my instinct is to talk and to take action. And so let's say you're thinking about doing an essay, you want to find all the facts and then put them together and do your essay. I just want to go. I mean, I just want to write and do stuff. And what I found very tough is that I get a few sentences into an essay and then realize I'm writing like the wrong thing or want to go
I
in a
was just
different
going to
direction.
say, like, how does that work for you to research essay
Yeah,
when you
it's
need
tough.
background info?
And especially like for like the diplomas where you had to write your essay in like 2-3 hours, and it was like, I mean, it was just awful. Like it's so it's very tough. And like one of the things too is like, so I'm kind of helping you become a good leader in your own respect. But one of the things that I found very tough is like one, it was tough to teach myself how to be a leader, but secondarily, it was very tough for me to start teaching other people how to be leaders too, because it's like you mean it's one thing to learn how to be a good writer yourself. That's a completely different thing to teach other people how to be a good writer, and especially a multitude of other people. Like teaching one person who's kind of like yourself might not be that hard, but teaching like 10 different people with different personalities,
Well, I
different
wish there was
learning
only
styles.
10.
Yeah, I mean whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's like it makes it a lot more complex, and you really have to get down to what are the basic tools, the basic kind of fundamentals that make sense for everything. So like some of the great coaches, what they do is they start from the basics. It's like this is a football. I mean, it's got laces here, and all that kind of stuff, and like John Wooden, it's like the first thing he'd do is like we're gonna learn how to tie our shoes.
John Wooden is a legendary basketball
Yeah.
coach, and he coaches in NCAA.
Yeah, he used to coach.
So he's
NCAA.
coaching university students how to tie their shoelaces.
Exactly. So you basically like, hey, take off your shoes, pull your socks all the way up.
Which
Make
would
sure
be the
you're clean.
equivalent of like your teacher saying, okay, we're going to practice writing today. This is a pencil.
Mm-hmm.
Pick it up. This is how you hold it. This is how you move it. And
This
that's
is
your
how you
first
sharpen
lesson.
it.
Yeah.
Like you mean?
This is how you sharpen it. This is an eraser. This is how you use it, right?
Exactly.
It's like,
And you mean there's actually people that don't have those basic skills, and it can be very useful to go back and make sure.
yeah.
I mean, it's like you're not erasing it where you rip up your paper in the process of it.
And, thinking about it now, like there's a lot of, there's a lot of humility in that approach. It's like you're not making these assumptions about the people around you. You're just saying, okay, this is how I'm going to do it, and we're going to go along. And if you understand it and know it, that's great. But I'm not going to assume that you were taught everything that I would expect you to know, right? Which I think in my profession is very common. It's like we get a student where we're at. For me in high school, being the last stage of public education, there is definitely a mindset of like their teachers prior to them failed them. And there is a degree of validity to that, I'm sure, but the reality is that that's irrelevant, right? What matters is, okay, am I going to continue failing them or not, right? So that's important. Like I could just say, throw my hands in the air and say, what do you mean you don't know how to write an essay in grade 10? Figure it out, right? And sit at my desk, and sure, that'd be great. I don't know, maybe play a game at my desk or whatever, read a book.
Yep.
But in 10 years, if they even remember me, all they'll remember is that I was a terrible teacher. It's like, oh, this guy didn't do anything for us. Like, I remember some of my teachers for that specific reason. Like, oh, I remember this guy because he left the country after he gave us a major assignment, didn't even bother to help us with it, and expected it done when he came back.
Yep.
Cool, thanks for being on my side. So
I think for me, it wasn't until like my first year of university that I had an English teacher who was good, who actually kind of explained like, here's a book about how to make it's like they say, I say, or something
have
like
that
that.
on the shelf, yeah.
And it's like, here's how you write an essay, and here's like you basically like you take a quote from the author or something like that, you quote it, and then you say, here's what I say about that. So they said this, I said this, and then you kind of talk about that. And then you get another person quote, and it's like, oh, okay.
And so I try to teach my students, it's like you're responding to a critical essay. It's like, here's a premise, here's an idea I have, here's some support. Right? You need the premise and you need the support. They're both fundamental, right? It's like making a sandwich. Like you wouldn't leave out whatever's in the middle. For us, it would be meat, and you wouldn't leave out the bun on the bottom.
Yeah.
You don't have a sandwich then, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like all these things are important.
But all I remember for other teachers is like, okay, it should be the first paragraph should be this big, second paragraph. And it's like that's not helping me.
Yeah.
It's like, and so you really gotta go back to the basics. And if it's natural for a lot of these teachers, they're not necessarily going to take the time and know to explain it simply. But that's the teacher I remember.
Mm-hmm.
All my other English teachers, it's like it was just a waste of time.
Mm-hmm.
Especially teachers are like, oh, you're just going to practice. Here's an assignment, just do it. And it's like,
mm-hmm.
you got to tell me, you got to take me through the steps, because it might be obvious to you, but it ain't obvious to me.
Right. Even like my grade 11s, it's like, you should know how to write, because I know I taught you to an extent. I didn't teach you perfectly, and we didn't do as much as we could have, but I know I taught you. We had a little bicker about that, but when it got down to it, it's like I'm walking them through the assignment. I'm exploring. I'm taking their ideas and trying to figure out, okay, how do we integrate this into the assignment, to the response, right? How do I? Because I can only teach so much with the material I have made, and whereas with my voice, it's unlimited, because talking is very simple, very straightforward. Thinking and putting ideas together, it's very easy for me, which is one of my gifts, and I'm grateful for it. So, leading them down this path, conducting this lesson first and foremost, and reminding them, like, don't forget this, don't forget that, or better yet, one thing I've noticed, I guess, kind of from Lenore Skenazy's book, Free Range Kids. And this idea that Jonathan Haidt has as well, like just stepping back and letting them come up with the ideas, really emphasizing, look at this photo. What are you seeing? Tell me, because everything you say is valid, right? We'll separate it after the fact, but I can't tell you what to write, because then you can't do it on your own. Mm-hmm. Actually, a guy I met at Jiu-Jitsu, very amazing, and he's kind of almost in his 40s. He had this shift in his life where, so he had his own personal life thing we won't talk about, but at work, he is now going to be the shop manager, and he's going to do things very differently to the last guy. The last guy had followers. This guy wants to make leaders, and so he's starting to tell his employees, people under him, like, hey, Johnny, I understand that you've worked here for 3 to 5 years, and this is how things were done, but I need you to get comfortable with the fact that things will be done differently, and I'm going to ask you to do things differently. So these guys come to him like, hey, I have this problem. What should I do? And he trusts his mechanics. He's a heavy-duty mechanic. And he asks them, say, well, like, you know this stuff. Like, what is supposed to be done in this situation for this part? What are some ideas? Go think about it. Come back to me in like 5-10 minutes. They come back in 5-10 minutes. They have ideas like, oh, I think I should do this, this, and this. You figured it out. That's the solution. Go ahead. Go do it. Mm-hmm. Maybe sometimes they come back and they bring him different information. Say, okay, like why do you want to do it that way? What about this way? And they have a discussion. But he's changing them from being followers to being leaders, and recognizing that they are very capable, competent mechanics.
Yep.
Whereas the last guy, everyone would come to him. Hey, boss, what do I do here? You're going to do X, Y, Z. Mm-hmm. Hey, boss, what do I do here? A, B, C. Hey, boss, what do I do here? And he tells them what to do, and so they're always coming to him. Whereas this guy wants to set up his shop. Like he basically just wants his guys to feel comfortable, confident, competent with what they're doing, right? And so recognizing that sometimes I need to step back and just let the lesson happen, and say that, okay, like, here's the exercise. I'm going to prompt you with questions. I'm going to poke and prod you to get some answers, but I'm not going to fill that space for you, because it's for you to learn. I'm learning something else right now. I'm learning how to lead this, whereas you're learning how to do this. It's very different, but I noticed kind of in the first few days prior to school, there were many parents coming in and just not letting their kids be independent and to answer questions for themselves. Mm-hmm. Right? And just to be silent and say, I'm going to have let my kid and his teacher have their moment. They'll talk, they'll interact, do whatever, and just moving on with life. Mm-hmm. So, as a leader, as a conductor, also giving space for people to do their own thing as well, and just observing and seeing where you can help out. I shouldn't say that on camera,
but no, I see, like, it's like as a tutor too, like I have to recognize it's like, if I'm walking the student through all the questions, they're not going to be able to do them on the test. Like,
no,
you mean, right? Like, I have to figure out how to help them get the skills, but then make sure that they're able to do these kind of questions on their own. Like, they have these skills that it's not looking to me, It's like they can do these at a set time and set pace or whatever on their own, and the kind of making sure and like, and it's good to remember, like you were talking about your students who you taught how to write before. It's like we need repetition. It's like we need to come back to things. It's easy to forget the important things in life.
So ultimately, they only did 2 essays.
Yeah.
And the first one, I acknowledged to them, hey, I made a mistake and I didn't teach you. And for the second one, we did what we could.
And to me, it's like I wouldn't trust that they kind of know how to do essays until you had about 5 good ones.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like just recognize you gotta keep coming back. And even it's like if you kept having those students, it could be good to keep coming back to the fundamentals, because like there's always area to improve on the basics. That just makes everything so much better. It's like it's best never to assume competence. It's it's kind of good to kind of take people through the basics and just make sure that everybody's on the same page. You don't want to do it in a condescending way, but like kind of like, hey, we still know what all these things are, because most times they don't. Especially for me with math tutoring, it's like there's a lot that they don't know.
Yeah, I would say my teaching style, it's a good mixture of humor and humility, right? Because like maybe I'll do the John Wooden thing. It's like, okay, everyone, here's a pencil. Hope we all see it. I'm gonna go sharpen it. Okay, now I'm ready to write. Okay, now that we all know how to get ready to write before we start, because you're gonna make mistakes. Here's how you use an eraser. We can make a joke about that and have a laugh, and if we're all laughing about the thing, then we can all work on it as well. And then from there, utilizing humility. Like I have no trouble telling my students, like, hey, I was really good at writing. I didn't really need a lot of help from teachers, and therefore I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I need data. I need to figure out if this works or doesn't work. So if it does, I'll use it. If it doesn't, we'll reevaluate. Maybe we'll scrap it. But having that relationship with the students, them knowing, okay, Mr. Quadra is going to be honest. Like, he's going to be straightforward. It's like, and you never really get a full perspective because there is that teacher-student dichotomy, kind of distance. But seeing in my grade 11s like a room full of competent writers patiently waiting for me to instruct them and guide them and conduct was very heartwarming. It was humbling. It's like, wow, like you can do this on your own. I know you can, but you're waiting for me to conduct. It's very amazing. I don't know why they do it, but they do. Right.
Well, you make everything else at that school better. Like if you bring in grade 9s and you teach them how to write and read and whatever effectively, it's like it makes all the English and social studies classes so much better afterwards. Because most people haven't taken that time to do that and really make it so it's effective. But it's just like, just imagine you had a class you properly taught how to read and write in grade 9, and you have grade 10, grade 11, grade 12. Life is just so much better. Like same thing like with like me and you living together. It's like it took a while to kind of find equilibrium and stuff like that, but it's like it's so nice to have other competent people around. Like you may taking the TELUS guy, and like I was still sleeping at the time, but I didn't have to worry about it not coming. Okay, what do we do? Thinking like dramatic or whatever. It's just effective. It's just like life is so much better. It's like to be a great conductor and to have like a great orchestra and all that kind of stuff. It's not only great for the conductor, but it's great for everybody involved if it's been done well. And it's like even like the audience who's watching. And to me, that's kind of what life's about. Is like it's just so much more fun when things are done right.
Oh, so much better.
Yeah.
That's as good as any place to stop.
Sounds good.
Thank you.